Welcome back, everyone. Today I bring you another episode of the Journey to National Master, and this episode has a story to it. I got paired up against this gentleman. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but Alain Meutir. I don't know. Sorry. 1436 rated player. This was the sixth round of Open Game of the Schwitters. This round was played in the morning. And the day before this game, I was just playing a double round, and I drank way too many coffees, as I said in the last episodes. And what ended up happening is that I went to bed and I couldn't sleep at all because of the coffee. And yeah, I was very tilted because it's pretty much impossible to play without sleep. When you're sleep deprived, you can't calculate. You just drop like 500 points at least in Elo. In my experience, unfortunately, this wasn't the first time that happened. But yeah, I was very triggered because the tournament was going pretty well, and I knew that I wouldn't be able to play a double round day again without sleeping. So, my strategy was okay. At least I kind of know what he plays against the Sicilian. I had the black pieces, and my opponent, you know, he opened with d4. I went c5, and he went d4. I knew that he played the Smith-Morra against the Sicilian, and what I basically did, because I couldn't sleep, I just woke up. I didn't woke up because I was always woke, but I just got out of bed really early and just watched a video on how to play against the Smith-Morra accepted. So this one right here, and I just repeated the video like 15 times and I just tried to memorize all the tricks and stuff like that. And my idea was, okay, I'm gonna try my best to win and to just you know get over with the tournament. I said to the arbiters that I didn't want to get paired for the last round, which was like an hour or 2 hours after this game, and that was it. So let's see how I managed to play under these unfavorable circumstances. So okay, after knight c3, I went knight c6. My opponent went bishop c4, a6, knight f3, and d6. And so far, this is like a very typical setup for the Smith-Morra Gambit. I also like to play the Smith-Morra online in faster time controls. And yeah, here I was expecting, castles and queen e2, rook d1, just the typical stuff. And my opponent just played e5 direct, which is not really a good move. But I was trying to remember what I saw in the video, and I was like, oh wait, this is like a mistake. I can just take here, and after this queen takes on d8, knight takes on d8, I'm fine. I thought, okay, knight takes on e5 and bishop e6, contesting this bishop and trading more pieces. I'm up a pawn, blah blah blah. And that was it. And all of a sudden, my opponent played knight d5. And I was like, wait a second. I don't remember knight d5 being an option during the video. And I was like very like, what is going on? Like, I don't what? Like, I was very confused. And I was confused for a good reason, because here e5 is really something that wasn't mentioned in the video, because it doesn't really make sense to play e5 so soon. But you don't take on e5. Taking on e5 is a big mistake. Here you should play e6. But during the game, I wasn't really thinking with my head. I was just trying to remember the video. And the thing is that the video explained that after castles, knight f6, and now e5 is is also not a good move, because now you can take. And after queen takes on d8, knight takes on d8, like it happened in the game, knight takes c5, and now bishop e6. And now, because the knight is already on f6, there's no knight d5. Also, there's no knight b5 because of the pawn on a6, so everything is good. And you're just pleasantly better. You're just gonna play g6, bishop g7, and castle. So just up a pawn. But what me and my opponent actually missed during the game is that here, without the inclusion of knight f6, which is very important, after I take, we trade queens. Now my opponent is winning, or really close to winning, after knight d5, and this is the move that me and my opponent both missed. The problem here is that my opponent is threatening knight c7 check, picking up my rook. Let's say I play king d7, for example, trying to protect the c7 square. Here I get it with knight takes on e5 check, and after I go, for example, for king e8, here there's knight c7 checkmate. So yeah, there's a lot of tricks, and yeah, after knight d5 you're already in big trouble. The computer suggests either rook b8 or knight e6. Let's say knight e6 and follow the engine recommendations for a bit. Here knight b6, rook b8, knight takes e5, and yeah, you can see that the position is very bad for black. Even though I'm still up a pawn, like, I'm just super underdeveloped. White's minor pieces are super strong. He's gonna castle soon. He's gonna put a lot of pressure in my position, and yeah, it's really hard for me to develop my pieces, you know. Let's say I do g6, trying to develop my bishop to g7. Here the computer says bishop b3, or even knight takes on f7 here, and after king takes on f7, bishop f4, and this rook is lost. It's just one of these examples. Also, just a slow move like bishop b3 is enough. Let's say bishop g7 here, and bishop a4 check. You can't really block with the bishop, so king f8 to protect the f7 square, but now knight b to d7 check, and after takes, picking up the rook. So yeah, it's really hard for black to do anything here, but we both completely missed this idea, and the game continued like bishop e6, knight e5. Here I just decided to take. I could have played maybe rook c8, but I didn't like allowing stuff like knight b6, and yeah, I just decided, okay, I'm up a pawn, I'm just gonna trade. It should be a decent strategy. Here I play d6, bishop f3, very annoying for me. This knight on e5 is really well placed for white. This bishop also has this annoying pressure on the b7 pawn and on this h1 to a8 diagonal. So okay, here I just played bishop d6, running into knight c4 with tempo, but I was like, okay, bishop c7 and it should be fun, you know. My bishop is controlling some key diagonals. Bishop e3, knight f6, and now bishop c5. Yeah, I also thought about knight e7, because, you know, after my opponent played bishop e3, I realized that he probably wanted to go to c5, and there's no real way for me to stop that, because b6 is impossible here. And after knight e7, the problem is that I can't really castle immediately, because the knight would be hanging there after I castle. So it was just very annoying. I decided to play knight f6, and after bishop c5, you know, I knew that something went wrong in the opening, because this is definitely not of what I saw in the video. But okay, I still had to play, you know. And I was still relying on my pawn up advantage. So okay, after bishop c5, here I play rook c8, trying to activate my rook and possibly attack the bishop on c5 in the future. Here my opponent played knight e6 check, which is kind of annoying because it forces me to trade my bishop for his knight, and now, okay, I'm up a pawn, but um, the thing is that my opponent has the bishop pair, and yeah, it's very annoying. Even though I'm up a pawn, I mean, the bishop pair, I would prefer in this position to have the bishop pair any time of the day, because I mean, these bishops just are way stronger than my knights here in a complete open position. But okay, bishop takes on d6, knight c6, trying to develop somehow, and here my pawn just castled, and I played king d7, trying because I can't really castle. I'm trying to do the manual castling with king d7, rook d8, and eventually going back with the king to e8. Here my pawn played the natural rook fd1, and here, you know, I spent some time. I was looking at knight d5, and I was looking at the move that I played, which I thought was actually a very nice move, which was rook hd8. And my idea with this move, that I thought was very clever, is that you know, when I'm threatening to just play king e8, and you know, my opponent doesn't really have any good discovered attacks on my position. Like, if he just goes back, which was my thought process, I thought that the only way for him to really do any damage was to go backward somehow. But I could always go king e8, and you know, I thought I was doing fine. I think I even stood up to go to the bathroom or something like that. I remember that day was the only day that I actually drank a Red Bull in my life. I was so depleted of energy that I thought, okay, I mean, I might as well go all in and just drink a Red Bull and a coffee to try to survive this game. I hated Red Bull, actually. Like, what the heck? How do people like that? I didn't really like it at all. But okay. Um, and when I came back from the bathroom, I saw on the board bishop f8, and I was like, what? How is this possible? Bishop f8? Is my opponent just winning the pawn back with interest? And I was like, I can't believe I missed bishop f8. And yeah, I just completely missed that my opponent had this move and he didn't have to go backwards. Bishop f8, and after king e8, bishop takes g7, king e7, king f1, and here I thought that I was completely lost. I played b5. B5 was just a move to kind of free up this knight. If I moved the knight a move ago, my opponent would take the pawn on b7, so I just wanted to free this knight so he could move. Here my opponent goes for the trade of rooks, because now I'm forced to take with the knight. If I took with the rook, the knight would be hanging, so take with the knight. And here my opponent plays bishop h6. And I played knight d7. The reason I played knight d7 and I didn't play something like rook c2 activating the rook was that I didn't really want to allow bishop g5 with my knight on f6, because if that happened, my opponent, like, my knight would just be stuck there forever, because if I move the king, the knight is hanging, and there's no other piece that can easily protect the knight. So I think I made a really good move with knight d7, at least practically speaking, to kind of dodge that pin. Now the pin doesn't exist because I can always kick the bishop with f6. And okay, knight d7. My opponent played rook c1, which, yeah, I felt like it was a good move, just trying to play an endgame of minor pieces and with the bishop pair. So okay, I have no option. I have to trade. And after bishop takes c1 here, you know, I spent a long time trying to figure out what would be the best way to approach this rather miserable position, in my opinion. I know that I'm probably exaggerating, and people that like playing with knights are probably cringing at what I'm saying, but I mean, it's really difficult, in my opinion, to actually play this with black, even though the engine gives equality, pretty much full equality. And yeah, it just feels way easier to play with a bishop pair. So okay, let's see how I handle this position here. I decided because it's an endgame, I should just bring my king closer to the center, trying to activate it as much as possible. Here my opponent also tried the same with king e2. I brought the knight on d8 to the game with knight c6, and my opponent played bishop d2, which I thought was really a weird move. And all of a sudden I was like, okay, like knight d4 check, king e3, knight takes on f3, king takes on f3, and knight e5 check. Here I spent a long time deciding whether I should play king d5, king e5, or knight e5 check. I decided knight e5 check, king e2, and king d5. And here I thought, oh my god, like I'm completely equal, or maybe I'm even better. Just look at the king activity. All of a sudden, I got rid of my opponent's bishop pair, and even though I have 3 pawn islands, all my pawns are perfectly placed on light squares. And he has a dark square bishop. So all of a sudden, everything is working in my favor. And, you know, knights can be really tricky. We were starting to get lower on the clock, something like 20 minutes for each player. So, you know, time was ticking, and I was all of a sudden fighting for a win here, and I was very happy. Just in a few moves, my opponent allowed me to get like a really good position. And yeah, here after king d5, my opponent played b3, logical, trying to stop knight c4. Here I went king d4, and you know, just look at my king. That guy, Jesus, it's so active. Like I'm really pushing him backwards, and you know, it's crazy. Here my opponent played f4, which the engine says it's a critical mistake that actually gives me a big advantage here, 0.7 minus 0.7. I just moved the knight back to c6. I didn't really see a point of going knight g4. I was, you know, h3, and I thought that I would have to go back to f6, and I thought that going directly on c6 would be better, just to not allow him to gain all those pawn moves that might be useful for him. So okay, knight c6, my opponent plays h3, I play h5, which I don't know if it was really necessary. Actually, h5 is kind of a bad move. Computer wants me to just play king e4 and hold the tension, maybe king e4 and knight d4 coming, maybe. But yeah, I just decided to play h5 because I thought that this would stop his expansion. Because after, you know, g4 takes, king e4, I feel like the pawns would just be dropping, and yeah. But yeah, h5, the computer doesn't really like that much. Here my opponent played g4, which was the move that I thought wasn't really possible, because after takes, I thought my opponent would just capture on g4, but actually my opponent played h4, which is a way trickier move, and the engine doesn't like it, but it's kind of hard to deal with it, because all of a sudden my opponent has a passed pawn on the h file, and I have to be careful, because if I'm not, maybe that pawn will be queening, and you definitely don't want to let that pawn queen. So here, after thinking for a long while, I was like, oh my god, like this can't work for white. I must be really winning, and I have to put all the effort in just winning this game. Here I played king e4, my opponent played h5, I played knight d4 check, and after king f2, knight f5, I thought, okay, this is over. Like, I have full control over the position, and it's just a matter of technique to convert this. Like, I stopped the pawn, this pawn is weak, this bishop is super bad here, and I just have an extra pawn for the time being. And my opponent played a4, which confused me a little bit, but I thought, okay, I might as well just take, and actually all of a sudden I lost most of my advantage. It's crazy how this little pawn trade makes all the difference. Here the computer says that I'm like way better if I just play a move like king d3, and I completely missed this idea of just ignoring this pawn tension here and going to attack the bishop and infiltrating actually with the king and just winning the pawns this way. But okay, here I go knight h6, and I don't remember why I actually made this move. I think maybe my idea was to just go f5, and yeah, this move is really bad because it allows his king to activate, and all of a sudden like I don't see any advantage for me. I like this extra pawn is really not doing much because yeah, I'm not gonna be able to utilize it. And yeah, just in a couple of moves I kind of screwed all the advantage that I had. Just takes, and knight h6 is just probably the worst move of the game that I played. I mean, here after king g3, king f5, now my opponent activates the bishop because now this pawn is defended, this pawn is blockaded, and yeah, I just went completely into damage control. I knew that probably this was no longer winning because my knight is just horrible on h6. When f6, my opponent went bishop f8 here. I went knight f7, and I still had some hopes of maybe creating a passed pawn here. And also if my opponent played h6 to maybe go king g6, knight takes on h6, check, trade, and I was still up a pawn, something like that. But my opponent plays bishop g7. The computer doesn't like this move at all for some reason. It says knight d6 is again winning. Kind of hard to understand, honestly. I'm not even going to try to understand why this is so winning. But okay. Here I just go e5, which was my plan, and after takes, here my opponent goes h6, and yeah, I realized that this whole idea of going king g6, taking the pawn on h6, trading no longer works because my opponent will easily grab the e5 pawn, and maybe if I actually do that, I might even be losing because my opponent will get to this pawn quickly, and maybe he will blockade me and just promote. So you know, I just accepted the draw by taking the pawn on h6, and after bishop takes on h6, you know, I sacrificed the knight and I'm down a piece. But if you know your endgames, you know that when you have a dark square bishop and the square that the pawn is promoting is a light square, you can't really win that endgame because I will just put my king on a8 and then go from a8 to b8, a8 to b8, and yeah, there's no really way for white to make any progress without stalemating my king, in which case it's a drop. So yeah, these moves were, you know, pretty just you know, it didn't have much impact in the game, just some moves. Just brought the king to a8, and here we agreed to a draw because yeah, it's just a draw. If you have studied some basic endgames, you know that yeah, this is just a draw. It's just how chess works. So yeah, I was kind of sad with the result of the game. Drawing against a lower rated opponent it always sucks, but okay, I mean, at least I didn't lose, right? But yeah, it was a very, you know, like tough game with a lot of swings in advantage for both sides, and yeah, in the end I wasn't able to actually play a good knight versus bishop endgame and convert to a win. I just choked it, but okay, at least I was able to get a draw. So yeah, this was the Open Queima das Fitas tournament. Overall, it was actually a nice tournament. I only lost one game out of 6 that I played, and yeah, that game was against a 2100. So, you know, I was very proud of the performance, and I ended up gaining some rating points, which is always nice. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye bye.